Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's Rob. I'll talk a little bit about myself in a moment. But for some of you regulars, you might notice I have a new home here on YouTube. With my friends at App Anvil. You'll see their name on some of the slides, and you'll hear me talk to them about a little bit. But you're going to get the same content about Confluence, about how to use the system and explore it that you have before. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about how to improve a Confluence space. As always, take a look at that chat. That's going to be the best way to interact, and I'll talk more about interacting in a minute. But first, I'm just going to jump into a few slides. So, your first question, if you haven't been here before, is who is Rob and why are you listening to him? I've had a career in IT. I also have a bit of a cold, so I apologize if I sound a bit off or cough a little during this. But I've been in IT for most of my career. I started as the help desk technician who came to install your monitor, but quickly got onto project work. And working on projects, I realized there is a lot of documentation and information that gets created on projects. And so I quickly got into knowledge bases. And this led me to Confluence about 9 or 10 years ago. And I enjoyed Confluence because it was the only tool I have. And a quick question, you'll notice App Anvil's helping me with questions now so I can stay on top of them. But if you've been in one of these with me before, would love to hear it. I've had some repeat customers, which is amazing. And this is actually one of the reasons I do this. When I learned to use Confluence, there was no training for me. I sat down at a desk and someone pointed at the Confluence logo, and that was all of the training. Anchor, yes, I believe help desk is the best way to start in IT. I still really enjoy that type of work. It helps individuals directly. You get to see them get something done and you get to solve problems. But it also exposed me to a lot of different things like knowledge bases. Excuse me. So all of my training around Confluence was just how to log into it. It was click on a logo and then it automatically logged in. No one taught me what a space was. No one explained permissions. No one showed me, how to organize anything. I was just kind of thrown into it. And this was okay for me. I'm okay learning how to do things. I don't know if my time on the help desk made it easier for me to pick up a system and just figure it out. But I know many people have trouble learning that way or they don't have the time. And so I've started doing these trainings to help folks like my old self and like many of you learn these things. I also have since then become a highly rated online instructor. I have a number of courses on different platforms that cover topics from project management to HR data analytics to how to set up a knowledge base. And again, my goal is to make sure folks don't have to suffer. Like the system should never be in our way. The system should help us do our job and do what we want to do. Now, I like YouTube because I can talk to a lot of people. I don't know how many dozens of people are in here with me right now. I was going to hopefully say hundreds. But this is a great way for me to interact with a lot of different people all around the world. Now, you can't really talk to me and I can't see you, so please use the chat. It should be over, I think I'm pointing in the right direction that way. I see a number of you have found it already, but please don't wait to ask questions. I'll try to save some time at the end. So if something pops up in your mind and you want to learn more about it, drop a question right in the chat. I will do my best to answer it live. And like most of my videos, I'll put together a follow-up video explaining all the answers as well. It does also help if you can subscribe. Again, I'm on a new channel right now. I'll do my best to put some videos on the old one, but please subscribe to this one and also like the stream. That lets us know what you find interesting. And I'm really excited to have some new interesting content coming out next year that I'm working on with the team. You can also save this, so if you have friends or teammates who would benefit from it, you can save it. It's like bookmarking it in YouTube. I will also, I can't say I will, the team and I will ask you some questions during this that might have a, are you comfortable or do you know something to it? A 1 means you're not comfortable at all. So if I asked how comfortable are you with Confluence and you've never used it, a 1 would work. A 5 is you're super comfortable or you know it really well. So that's another great way. Matt, welcome. Good to see you here. So I'll cover a few more slides just to orient everyone. I'll have some concepts. So some ideas that we all should understand and like fundamental things and terms that I'll bring up when we get hands-on in a free version of Confluence. So we're going to start off with why do we even want to improve a Confluence space? Like why are we talking about that thing? Then I'll dig into some common challenges that I see teams run into, as well as tools we can use to analyze and work with Confluence. Then I'll talk about the importance of look and feel, which honestly I need to get a lot better at. I don't consider myself a designer. I don't consider myself graphically oriented, which might be a bad story to tell myself. But we'll dig into why it's important for Confluence to look good. And then we'll talk about structure and the importance of planning or replanning it. After those few slides, we'll jump right into a free version of Confluence. I'm using a free version today just to ensure that everyone has accessibility to what I'll be doing. So there will be some features that are available in, say, Premier or Enterprise that I don't touch on, but please ask those questions about them. So if you think I'm missing something, please bring it up. Katrina, I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome from Vermont. And another question for the group to consider. Have you ever tried to improve a Confluence space, or have you ever found one that isn't organized well? And what made it a bad space, or what made it off? Now, challenges face a lot of spaces, spaces face a lot of challenges. I can imagine everyone has been into a Confluence space or a page at some point in time that didn't look like it was done well. Or maybe you think Confluence is broken. That's something else I've seen. It might have outdated content. You might realize all the information is old. There might be missing information. You're looking for a step-by-step and steps 6 through 10 are missing. Not a lot of people might be using it. It might not be actively worked on. A whole bunch of different challenges. And this is all perfectly natural. When we build out Confluence, hopefully we spend time to plan it, but then groups tend to forget about it. I rarely meet a group who is really prioritizing knowledge work. Anchor, this will be in Confluence Cloud. That is a great question. I will do my best to call out differences between Confluence Cloud Free and Data Center. But if you don't understand, please ask the question. Ask me which were organized well, Liz. Much shorter that way. I personally have rarely run into a very well organized or maintained space. It's just uncommon. So these are some of the biggest groups of challenges. The first one I see is buy-in. Convincing a team or an executive or a manager to dedicate resources and time and energy into actually building it out and maintaining it. So just convincing people it's necessary. And this could be me as an individual convincing them, or it could be my entire team trying to convince them. I was at a very large global organization where at an all hands, someone asked, why is Confluence so terrible? And the head of IT had to come and say, we haven't prioritized resources for it. We didn't have buy-in to go do that. Another one is just resources. Even if teams want to improve it, it can be hard if you don't have time, you don't have someone who has time in their schedule or money to do it. Now, this to me is a bit of it's a challenge, I was going to say, because it can be fairly low lift to actually improve Confluence. So I'll show you some things you can do to get around that resource constraint. And I'll also talk about the buy-in aspect. Now, the third challenge is consistency. If we think of Confluence, it's a dynamic thing, and it's a living thing. And over time, it needs maintenance. So if we maintain it once or twice, that's good, but we really have to maintain it all the time to make sure it's consistently useful. And that's where a lot of groups also get tripped up. I also love the amount of stuff going on in the chat. I will encourage folks, if you know an answer to a question or want to chime in on someone else's comment, please feel free to jump in. This isn't just about me talking to one or two people. So here's some of the toolkit that I'll be talking about. Another just general question, have you ever had trouble getting buy-in for Confluence? Just something to consider. I'll walk us through 2 key tools that I find very useful. I'll also talk about some alternative tools that I've used in the past. But whiteboards are recent, in the past year or so, addition to Confluence. It allows us to design a graphical thing intended for something like brainstorming or building a systems map or building a map of Confluence. Unfortunately, there's no button you can push that will put all your Confluence pages automatically onto a whiteboard, but I'll show you a couple of tricks that I've found where I can visually map out what does Confluence look like. So then we can map out what do we want it to look like to be better. We also have databases, again, relatively new in the past year or so. I think of them as something between a table and a Jira ticket. A table can be organized, but not many features, whereas a database is much more structured. I use databases to list out the pages I have and confirm things like the page owner, when it was last updated, and if we want to keep it or not. So in the past, I might have used a spreadsheet instead of a database. And I still work with teams that really like using spreadsheets. So sometimes I do. But I really prefer to use a database. It's in Confluence. My information sits right there in the space, and it ties directly into the pages. So I'll show you this live. Whiteboards, I prefer to use actually a physical whiteboard. That's a lot more challenging when I have a virtual team or I'm working with a group that isn't all in one spot. And I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but this is just coming fast and furious. I absolutely love this. I will take a quick break to see if I missed any questions and have a sip of delicious coffee. Confluence is intimidating for business team members if you let them loose with no training. 100%, Zach. We want to be careful when we introduce someone to Confluence that they have some support. And that's actually, I don't have a slide for that, but that is a great call out. When we introduce new people, we should have a training like this for our team that lets them know the basics or how we set it up. Sandra came in from SharePoint. Has a folder structure. Sandra, you're reading my mind. I will talk about that in a moment. And seeing some feedback on using whiteboards. Hranar, I hope I'm saying that properly. Don't like them in Confluence. Totally okay. I appreciate that there are whiteboards in Confluence just because it puts them all in one spot. That said, they're not yet as feature-rich as other similar tools. Or if my team already has another tool in its workflow, it can be hard to pry them out into something new because they're so used to this other tool. Excuse me. So the next thing we're going to talk about is analyzing the space. Before we can really understand how we want to change it, we have to understand what's in there. Now, depending on how long you've been with the organization, you will have more or less knowledge about the space just in general. But you do want to understand some things, like how much is it actively being used? What might be missing from it? Who owns parts of it? The screenshot you see here is from a premium feature called the Content Manager, which in this free version I'll show you I don't have. So I'll talk about some ways around that. But you do want to start asking around. This isn't just about using Confluence to understand Confluence. You might want to chat with your team or other people who use the system to see, hey, how are you using Confluence? What are the gaps? What are the things that I can solve with it? Or what is it doing well? And then, of course, look at Confluence itself. See if you can identify where information is missing. Maybe there are just pages that you think should be completely changed. Or maybe there are pages with owners who have left the company. Or maybe your page statuses aren't being used at all. So taking time to analyze and sit down and understand what's in there is an important part of improving your space. Again, it's not just about the tools we get to use. It's also about sitting down and understanding what's in there so we can then figure out where do we want it to go to best support the team. Now, I mentioned look and feel earlier, and you can see I'm not a designer because I made a mistake on this slide and made it identical to a prior one. But look and feel is also an important aspect. When we jump into my demo space, there's going to be pages that are just a wall of text. And when I consider the experience of someone using it, a wall of text isn't very useful. It's just words continuously with no breaks, with no organization, with no links. And so when I think about reforming or rebuilding a Confluence space, I want to consider when I look at the page, is it visually interesting? Does it make it easy to find information on it? Is there something about it that draws my eye? Or even as the person maintaining it, does it automatically update itself? So there's going to be a lot of considerations. And again, I'm still learning all of these things, but I'll share what I've learned so folks can avoid that challenge of having a page that doesn't look very good. Because I've definitely had people tell me, hey, Rob, the information on your page is great. I just can't bring myself to read it. It looks terrible. So we'll talk a bit about some things we can do with look and feel, both from stock Confluence and also with a couple macros that App Anvil provides. Quickly going to jump into the chat real quick again. I can see people talking about folder structure. Tables of contents, yes. I also like how people are reading my mind and just giving all of my secrets away in the chat before I even get to them. Kathira, I hope I'm saying that right, lives in Jira and Confluence. Uses a private account to organize things. I love that. Okay. And it will help if you have a question to add a hashtag question to it, just so we can pull it out more easily. Graphic design background. Okay, well, Sandra, you got me beat there. One of our last slides talking about planning a structure. So it's very easy to go into Confluence and just start adding content, adding page of great information after page, adding a database. And this can be wonderful because you'll have all that stuff in Confluence. But if it isn't organized, if it isn't structured in a way that makes sense to either your editors or your consumers, it's going to be hard for people to find and access things. So how pages relate to each other is an important thing to consider when we think about improving Confluence. Now, over time, things will change, and I use two analogies to think of Confluence. The first is a library. This beautiful building is the instance, and inside is all of our content. But libraries have librarians who are constantly going through it to make sure things are organized and maintained. If we didn't have librarians and we opened a library, even if it was perfectly organized on the first day, over time books would disappear. Shelves would get knocked over. Things would be put in the wrong place. And over time, that library that was perfect on day one would become completely nonsensical in a few months or a year. I also think of it like a garden. If I don't go into my garden and pick the weeds and move everything around, eventually it's no longer a garden, it's just a patch of plants. So we want to take time to plan the structure and then maintain it as we go. New team members will join who we need to train, who put things in the wrong spot accidentally. So making sure we have a plan to start with, even if it changes, is an important thing we need to consider when we want to look into improving Confluence. So I'll show you, and I'll use whiteboards for this, but you could use, again, a physical whiteboard, some other diagramming software, some ways we can plan out our structure before we go in and start making changes. So I have a quick scenario. The JQuil space, and if you're familiar with JQuil, give me a quick shout out in the chat, is in a bad spot. I had set it up a while ago, and I thought it looked great, but I made the mistake of not maintaining it. And my team has been using it and adding and moving things, and now people don't like going in there. It's scary. They can't find anything. It's hideous. And we're going to go in and take a look to see what we can do to change all of that. So quick break. I don't think I missed any questions. Okay, I don't see any. Again, after this, I will go through the chat and pick out every single question and provide a follow-up answer. So if I don't get to it today, I'll do my best to get to you soon. And this is my reminder that we're going to teleport into Confluence. So we are looking at Confluence Cloud free version. And again, I chose a free version today just to make sure that it's accessible to absolutely everyone. It's also honestly a little bit of a challenge because there are some tools I can speak to that I don't have in the free version. Apologies. So here we have my space. And there's one thing right away that pops out in terms of improving a space that I haven't spoken about yet. And this is a bit of an unplanned question. I just see someone, yes, love JQL. So Chad got it. The term JQuil is how I pronounce JQL, Jira Query Language. It's a little bit of an inside joke. But there's one thing I didn't really speak about in those slides that's important when we think about the space and about look and feel, and that's the homepage. When someone first comes to this space, they're going to land on the homepage. So if they go to Spaces and select it, they're going to see this. And right now, this is a stock homepage. This is what Confluence just gave me out of the box, which is a page. Now, when I made the space, I made the mistake of not editing it. And this is very common. I see many teams that get a space and they only consider the content, the information they want to put in it. They don't take time to build out this top level landing page. And that's what I think of this as. This is the landing page of the space. If someone new comes here, this is what they see first. So if I don't take time to make this look good or to update it, this is wasted effort. Someone will come here and go, there's nothing here, and go away. That's the worst case. More likely, they're just going to get frustrated. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this page a bit. And I'll use this to demonstrate some of the look and feel. But templates in Confluence are a great thing. That said, I shouldn't be afraid to edit them. So I can come in here and delete some of this. Maybe I don't like this gray bar. I want to make it, I don't know, a purple bar. Or maybe, I like the green. So adding some color. I can change this to an emoji. So maybe I like this. I lost it. I like this little person with the monocle. Now, I know that there are design principles. I don't know them. So I apologize to all the designers out there. But I'm just trying to make this more visually interesting. Something that when someone comes here, they're going to look at and go, oh, I want to go look at this. Additionally, I'm going to add some good content to this. So if someone trips over this page, they know what to find in here. So I'm going to give this a quick description. The proper way to say JQL. Maybe I don't have any projects, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to delete the project tracker. And I've got this recently updated content. Let's pretend that that is interesting. I don't like that it's vertically stacked like this. And this is how Confluence by default works a page. It just goes top to bottom. I'm going to add some, they call them layouts. And it's this little button up here. And I want 2 columns. Now, I'm limited to the number of columns I can have, 3 maximum, or 2, or 3 with a big one in the middle. But this does give me some way to visually break up the page. I frequently do this quite a bit on pages, and I'll show you another way that I use these. But here, I'm just going to copy and paste this into my columns. And I'm just using the Command X for cut on my keyboard. Oops. Yep, maybe I'll make that one yellow. That's fine. And so now it just looks a bit different. It might be the same content, which is fine. I haven't adjusted that yet. But it breaks it up differently for someone coming to the page. Now, I can keep going and keep building this out. There might be other areas of this space I want to draw people's attention to. Maybe there's certain types of content I want to surface here. So I'm going to add a header. And I might use some keyboard shortcuts like Command, Shift, and then a number to make the header. Or I can just click up on header. But I might call this part, meeting notes. And I'll add a / and then look for, they've renamed it, filter by label. You'll hear me refer to this as content by label. That is the old name. But this lets me pull in pages based on a label on the page. This is something else I haven't spoken about yet. But making sure all of my pages are properly tagged or labeled with additional information is very important. I think of these labels like on the outside of a book, you might have the type, it's biology, or on the outside of a jar, you know what's in it. Question, my starter page template doesn't have the contributors section or recently added content. Katrina, excellent question. This came from the type of space I happen to create. I forget which one offhand, but I'll double check in my follow-up for you. What you can do, this is just text. So you could just add to your own page the words recently updated content. And this blue box, I always type in warning. It's called a panel. So to get to that, you can either click on this plus, add elements, and just type in panel. Whoops. And you have to spell it properly, of course. And you'll see there's an info panel or a note panel or an error panel. But they're all basically the same thing. They're all going to give you that box. And then you can change the icon, which automatically changes the color. You can pick your own emoji. And you can see there's a whole, here's a monkey. And then make the color. You can also get rid of the emoji if you don't need it. But the panel is a great way to add visual pop to the page without any kind of add-on. So again, this is free Confluence. So every version of Confluence Cloud has these panels. I tend to use them to draw attention to something. For example, if there's a critical step in a process where someone has to download a backup file or click a certain button, I'll make a big red panel that says, remember to click this button with more information just to draw the eye. Now there are 2 macros in here you'll see. One is called recent updates. And the way to get to any macro is just a / and just recent updates. And the other is contributors, just typing in contributors. Whoop. Apologies about that. I joke that there's always one little thing that goes buggy for me in these streams. So my video is back. Thank you for calling that out. And the other is contributors. So these are just some macros. I won't dig too much into macros right now, although I'll consider some follow-ups on walking through some more useful ones. But these are great ways to add more functionality to a space. And they're also something teams commonly forget about when they build out a space. For example, the one I'm going to use here dynamically will pull in pages based on a label, which is a way of organizing content. So for example, if I want to pull in every meeting note, as long as there are pages that have the meeting notes label, this macro will automatically pull them in and display them here. Now, considering how people will use this space, I might not want to include the meeting note label. So I might come in and edit this and go to more options and tweak it a little. And then maybe order it by newest to oldest. Oops. But this is one way to help make this homepage where someone first goes more interesting. I might not always put meeting notes here. Maybe I only do this for, say, a project page or an important thing about an all hands or something. But this is one way to make the homepage more interesting. Now, I do want to call out one app that App Anvil has that can make this even more useful. They have something called Aura. And let's see if I can remember the name of this one. They have one called Dynamic Content that does something very, very similar to what I just showed you. But this will pull in a list of pages with these beautifully rendered cards. So when I think of the look and feel for my space, I want to consider what it looks like as well. So instead of just getting text, I get these images behind it. And I have different ways I can select images. I won't dig too much into all of these settings, but this is another way that I make pages more interesting. Someone coming here will look at this and see this dynamic thing pop up and see all these different options. And it's much easier for them to jump in than if it's just text in a list. Now, that said, we don't all have access to Aura, which is fine. So this text list can be really good, a great way to help share information. Now, if this was my real space, I would spend a lot more time building this out. And we can see here, I have a lot of meeting notes, so I'd want to adjust this a little. And here are all those dynamic content, all of the pages. But already we can see I have a page that's a little bit more interesting than just, hi, welcome to the space. So that's considering look and feel. How do I make Confluence look more interesting and visually appealing to people? Martin, where do I get custom emojis? That is a great question, Martin. The ones that I showed you right here, I believe these all just came with Confluence. This is a very young instance, only about a week old. So all of these are right here. And I also have the add my own. So if I kind of like, there's some instant messaging software, I could give one a name. Maybe I have one called Rob. I can then choose a file and insert it. So I have worked with groups who have in-jokes or things that their teams work on now that build them in. but you can go in and add your own. I see someone called out the cards macro. Ted, thank you. I'll quickly drop that in. And I can see Jan's already on me. First off, it's not available in free, so I can't show it to you right here. It's just in premium or higher. The other trick with it, though, is it isn't dynamic. I have to come in and change the cards. So if you have access to it, it's a great step in the right direction. It's much better than just text. However, it doesn't have this dynamic, automatically updating, ability that this Aura panel does. Or sorry, dynamic content does. Okay, I'll touch a little bit more on look and feel. I did want to make sure I called it out here because I tend to forget about it because it's not my strongest suit. I do want to talk about planning though. So on the left here, I have a bunch of pages. I have some meeting notes, and we can see that this space is not well organized. I have some untitled pages. This is a bad habit of mine where I go and make content, but I always forget to build it. Emily says I should take some Jquil for the cough. If you can find me a bottle and send it my way, I would love that. That would be very helpful. I can see I have some untitled pages. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go make a whiteboard. And I'm just going to start mapping out the current space. I'm going to start with a blank one. And I love how Confluence is now asking me to give it a name. It is very easy to forget the name because it's up here in the corner. And it automatically defaults to untitled. Unlike a page, which will give you a default one, you might end up with just untitled. So all I'm going to do here is I can start dragging, I can copy link addresses and paste them in. I can look for, where'd you go? Adding a link here by just clicking and dropping in pages. And you'll see these appearing as icons. And so I can start organizing these in some kind of structure. And I might just keep doing this until I get all of my pages. But then I can visually line them up, and I can group them and say, okay, I've got a few untitled. I've got a requirements thing here. Who am I missing? I'm missing some meeting notes. Now, one thing you'll notice about this process is I have to drag each page in as its own object. So this can be a little bit time consuming. The other way I do this is just with shapes to represent, ooh, I got some confetti. Some shapes to represent groups of pages. Here I have a pretty small space, so it's easier for me to represent every page as something. But I might do this for every page if I really want to dial in exactly what things should look like. So I'm quickly just going to organize them into groups to see what kind of stuff I have in here. And again, this is helping me analyze what do I have. I might even pull out a panel and call this one meeting notes. I've got one over here called maybe junk pages. Helps if I spell correctly. And then I've got other. And one thing I'll remind folks, this isn't something you have to do by yourself. When I work on a space, I typically go and ask around for help from the team. I go look for someone who knows more about Project Jquil or who's worked on it, or who is interested in learning about Confluence. It's more important to me that I have someone I'm working with who wants to learn about it, and there's going to be someone in your organization who wants to learn how to do this. And even if they don't know anything, that interest and energy will help you get things done. So I'll sit down with them and help them figure out, hey, what's going on here? What groups are we missing? What pages did we miss over here? And this might take some time. The last time I helped a team rebuild a space, it was a few months. It was a very large space visible to thousands of workers. And so we took a lot of time to plan it out. And it was a bit painstaking. We did multiple versions of this exercise to make sure we got it right. Now, after we had this grouping, we then figured out what do we need to get rid of. These junk pages. Well, let's go look at them to make sure they're actually junk. Okay, this is just a blank page. And that's a blank page. So I'm just going to get rid of these entirely. I'm just going to straight up delete them. And then I'll go back to my map. And you'll notice that we can't show you this page in Confluence. And that's because it doesn't exist. Now, this is something that I appreciate how Confluence gives me that message. It would be nice to say if, hey, it is deleted or I don't have access, but I understand why it gives me that particular one. Katrina, did I make changes live in a sandbox first and then roll them out? This is where it was tricky, Katrina. I had two options. We have two options when we make changes. One is we go to the live space, we go into our version of jQuil, and we make the changes in a quiet time. So when I did this the last time, we did this on a Friday, like 4 o'clock our time. Not many people would be using Confluence. They wouldn't notice everything moving around all the time or new things being added. My other option would have been to make a whole new space and do everything in there. I opted for the first one, for using the same space and the same pages, because Confluence will maintain links. So if I just move a page around, or even if I rename it, Confluence will keep hyperlinks to it working. If I make a new version of that space, anyone who has saved it as a bookmark or hyperlinked it from other documentation, that link might not work. So I didn't want to risk a whole bunch of people getting very angry with me that all of their stuff doesn't work. So instead we just chose, 4 p.m. on a Friday. Let's get 2 or 3 people to follow the plan. So I can get rid of the junk pages now. And now I have all the pages I want to keep. Whoops, I want those back. So here, I'm going to pull them out of these nice sections I have, get rid of the sections. And then I'll just click on jQuil, which is the top, and then I'll just draw lines to indicate what's my hierarchy. Now, this is a very simple version. There's only a few pages. But this visually shows me and will guide me in rebuilding my structure here. So this is only for existing content, though. I also need to consider what is missing. What information about jQuil do I need to have? So I would then talk to other people. I would have my own ideas, but I'd go to my team or I'd go to individuals who use it and say, hey team, here's what I already know about jQuil. Help me fill in the blanks. What else do I need to know? And maybe I need a background page because people are always confused about what's going on in jQuil and why it exists. And maybe under the background page, I need a history page because history relates to background. And I'll keep doing this to identify what missing content do I have. And I'm really not creative right now, so I'll just call that the other thing. So now I have this document that shows me how it will look at the end of the day. And this is something I'll tinker with before I start making any changes, because now is the time to think this through. Again, the space is already there. People are already unhappy with it. So I'm going to wait to really change it until I'm really sure. So now I have all these ideas. I want to track my progress. How I've done this historically is I would open up a Google spreadsheet. That's what my organization happens to have. And I would just list out every page, who owns it, when it was updated, and what we're going to do with it. Instead, I want to keep everything in Confluence, so I'm going to use a database. I think of, a database as what a table wants to be when it grows up, if that makes sense. I've used these for things like project planning. I've seen people use them for CRM. I've used them to plan out Confluence. It looks exactly like a table, but it can also do things like connect to Confluence or Jira. It can do things like add in dynamic user fields. It can pull in some information from Confluence. So here, I might delete this text field, and I'll do a quick demo of this. I won't dig too deep into them. But I do want a page, and this will just be called maybe content. And then in my database, I would just populate out each page in the current space. And you'll see that there's just a list of them. And again, that's because it's integrated within Confluence. But I would end up with the same list of pages here that I have in my whiteboard. Now, what I really wish is that there was a button I could push that would just pull in from my whiteboard all of that information, including the blank pages. There is a way I can link in every single page from the space. Excuse me as well. But here I might have a status field So I can track how are things going, and maybe this is in progress. What essentially I'm doing is setting up a little mini project tracker where each page can have its own status that I can track, and I can assign them to a particular person, maybe the owner for the update. And maybe I have to make a new page, so I could list that in here as well. At the end of the day, I'll then get a document I can go through and make sure every page has been updated, every page has been evaluated, every page has been considered or built out if it needs to be. Okay, we've got a how comfortable are you with databases? A couple of 5s, love it. A 0, ooh. I appreciate when folks put a 0 or a 1, meaning they don't know anything about them. It can be really hard to raise your hand and say, hey, I don't know. The best advice I can share is it's better to be thought a fool for a moment than remain ignorant for the rest of your life. I learned that when I was young, and I try to keep that in mind. So I appreciate the folks who are saying, hey, I don't really understand this. That's why, again, I've seen a lot of back and forth in chat, and I love the interactivity. I do have other videos on databases to dig into them, and I'll talk more about them here. Or not too much about them here, but they're a way to, I use them as a way to track work. I also appreciate them because they live within Confluence. I don't have to send my stakeholders or my team somewhere else. When they come in to see Project Jakewill, they'll see all the information about it, including this database. So from here, when I'm considering this space, my next step would be to build out these extra pages. So I need a background page, I need a history page, and an other thing page. So I'm just going to hit plus and add a page. And this is where blank pages can be kind of intimidating. When I send someone in here to build something out, unless they have a clear vision of what it should look like, it can be really hard for them to build out content. And this is where Confluence over time can start to break down. New people will be adding things, and they may not know exactly how to construct a page. And that's okay, they're new, right? So that's where templates come in. So along the bottom, this little pop-up appears, and I'll click on All Templates. And I won't go through all 140, but I always encourage folks to search through these. I do have an entire other training about templates because these are so confusing and there's so much here. But definitely something to check out. I always guide folks to them. There are a few I use a lot. I've got a how-to. This is one of my favorites. It's so simple. It's just steps. But I give it to folks when they build out content because it will guide them through how to build it in a way that makes sense. So this makes it much easier when they add the content to fit in with the rest of everything else. So let's pretend that this is exactly what we need. I've also noticed that the publish button has moved. I don't know if anyone else has that. It's no longer a nice blue button at the top. Katrina loves the how-to and troubleshooting templates. Liz, the 4 L's in risk management. Liz, I remember the 4 L's. Live, laugh, love. I forget the 4th one. Help me out. Now, the other thing templates do is include labels, which I've barely spoken about. But at the bottom of this page, there's a plus add label. This adds additional information to the page that Confluence can then use. Again, on my home page, I was using it to automatically pull in meeting notes. But imagine if I use it to automatically pull in just how-to articles, or maybe just how-to articles about Project Jakewill. I encourage teams to consider a labeling scheme, so have a strategy for how you'll label. Every page gets a label about the product it impacts, or the team that owns it, or the area of the world that should use it. And then other labels, the name of the system that it's involved with. Sometimes folks don't want to put extra labels on because they feel like it'll be too many, but I haven't seen an upper limit. Don't go too crazy, but we do want to add labels to help Confluence search find things, but also to help other macros find things and pull in information. So yikes, I'm running short on time. So I've got my background page. I'm going to go back to my document real quick, and I'm just going to visually rearrange the rest of the pages. So I've got my project meeting notes. Oh, I've got this team update. There's a meeting note. I'll put it under its parent. Now, team update's an interesting one. For those of you who have heard me talk about blogs, loathe, I use blogs as like a point in time update. So when I consider Confluence, I don't put my team updates or my sprint updates, if you're familiar with that term, as a page. I make them blogs. So when I look at a space that has something that was an update that is only relevant on a particular date, and then we're never going to go back and update it, I might go up here and convert it to a blog post instead. Now this will pull it out of the page hierarchy and put it down here under blogs. So that's the only visual difference. For me, this helps unclutter the page hierarchy. I want the hierarchy to be more about living documentation, things that will change, instead of the blog post, which is exactly on this date this happened. Now, this does mean my team will have to know to go look at blogs, but there are macros I can include that pull in blog posts. So I do my best to pull out things like this and put it in under blogs. And again, I can do that from any page by converting it to a blog. Now, this page is interesting, and someone already mentioned folders. Many teams will have a placeholder page like this one, just called Project Meeting Notes, whose whole purpose in life is to just have lists of links to other things. This page is not useless, but it's pretty useless. Recently, the nice people at Atlassian, the people who make Confluence, added folders, and this made me very happy. So I can just add a new folder, and instead I'll call the folder Meeting Notes. I'll just bring it to the top, quickly drag my content in, and now you'll notice when I click on the Meeting Notes folder, nothing changes over here. It's not content. It's just a way to organize information. And if I click on it, it just opens and closes. So it doesn't clutter up my space tree in the same way as a page that's sole purpose is just to hold information. So I always encourage groups to consider, what is this page doing? If the only thing it's doing is linking to another page or a list of pages, get rid of it and make it a folder. That way it doesn't take up space. Emily thinks folders are awesome, but doesn't want them to show up in macros to show child pages. There are some things I've tripped over with folders. I couldn't find them earlier. I forget exactly what I was trying to do. Automatically insert a page with a template. I couldn't insert it under a folder for a little while, and then it started working. So it is relatively new in terms of features, so I'm sure they'll keep making them better. But in the short term, I found them incredibly useful for letting me do things like delete placeholder pages and just uncluttering Confluence a little bit. And I've already made a mistake, and I didn't name my database. And I spelled it wrong. All right, folks, we have about 10 minutes left. I have one last slide to show y'all. Barbara, love the question. Emily, thank you for answering for me. Folders are not currently available in Data Center, just on cloud. So thank you for that shout out. Teleporting back to my slides. You might be wondering what is next. And that is a great question. This is by no means all there is to know about how to improve Confluence. This is just some of the things that I have learned and experienced over time. The first stop I'd recommend is Atlassian's community, community.atlassian.com. Curious who's in the community right now. One thing to consider is use a personal email for community. And I say that because I used a work email and then I lost my job and then I lost access to my community account. There is apparently a way to get access to it or to merge the account, but please save yourself the trouble and use a personal account in there if you're comfortable with it. But a great place to ask questions. I hang out in there. A bunch of other super smart people, excuse me, are in there who can help answer questions and share stories. There's also all of Atlassian University, which they made free back in April. So all of Atlassian's official training on all their products is free in there. It's pretty neat. Next, go get hands-on. If your organization uses Confluence, go play with it. So go in and get hands-on and experience Confluence. Don't push any button that says delete, but otherwise, you can't really hurt it. Check out some of my other content on this channel or my other one, heen.tech, but also check out others' content. The whole point is to learn and get better at using the system and the process. So the more perspective and the more information we can get, the better we get at being confluencers. Actually, there's a good question for the group. What do we call people who use Confluence? I need a good noun. But also talk to others. It's been really great to see the chat here going back and forth with different people, some that I know, some that I don't, talking about things. Katrina finds searching in Confluence frustrating. Yes. The trick with community is that there will be different articles about different versions of Confluence. So there is Data Center, where an organization manages their own servers, Confluence Cloud, where Atlassian does it, and an old version called Server, where you can manage it on one box. Just be sure when you're searching for help, you're looking for the appropriate version. Many groups are on Cloud, however, some are on Data Center. So if you get on the wrong one, you'll get the wrong answer. I'm going to check quickly for questions, and again, I will do my best to pull out every question and answer them over time. But what do we have? And if you have any last minute questions, drop them in here, please, just so I can catch them right now. Starter page templates. Ooh, question. What's the best resource for learning to write JQL? Zach, I have a Udemy course on that. Selfish shout out to that. Honestly, YouTube will probably help you with JQL. If you type in JQL help, JQL beginner, things like that, that can help. And Atlassian's community also has a lot of great JQL information. But JQL, Jira query language, JQL, can be challenging to figure out, especially if you don't understand the context of it. All right, not seeing any new questions. And I think I answered most of the ones that I could find. Runner, trying to convince a company where I started in August to buy Confluence and Jira, 100% is not very technically advanced. So you might have some challenges with buy-in there. When I consider convincing a group to use a tool like Confluence, I look for the benefits. If you can identify pain points, it's hard for workers to find their documentation. People don't know where to go to onboard. People don't understand their health benefits. You can sell a tool like Confluence as a single point of truth to get everything. One spot where everyone can go to search and find something. Zach was saying Confluence is intimidating for business users. Training is important. Make sure that you talk to your team about ways to help the team improve or to use the system. Again, if we just let folks loose in there, some of them will figure out a good way to use it, but many of them will either get frustrated or build out things in a way that is detrimental to the overall platform. So it's not just about one piece of content being good, it's about all pieces of content working together to support the overall space or instance. Katrina, I Google how to search for XYZ in JQL. Katrina, what is XYZ? I'm not familiar with that. No, I'm kidding. It could be a project key. Jan, thank you. I am feeling much better. Liz, is there a way to bulk add your branding to templates? I can't think of one off the top of my head, Liz. Most of the templates we have when we start using Confluence are what they call blueprints. And I'll very quickly jump into templates. But you'll see blueprint templates. And blueprints, I didn't know what these were for years. They're what Atlassian and different marketplace partners give you. So these are just seeded in. You can go in and edit the blueprint, but I don't know of any way to insert something across every template. You might be able to insert like a header or a footer under page layout, but let me have that as a takeaway and see if I can follow up on it. There's not a way to do bulk anything in Confluence. I'm going to be overly specific, Emily, and say there is. There are some ways to do things like bulk archiving, but I understand what you're saying. GBDBN1, hope I said that right. ChatGPT can be very useful for JQL. Those LLMs are very powerful with things like SQL or JQL. Just validate that what it gives you is correct. So before you, build out the thing entirely, do some testing to make sure it gives you exactly what you want. Liz is saying if you use API and Forge, so if you have some programming capabilities, you can go in and automate a lot of things. All right. So, team, I want to thank you all for sticking around with me. Um, Also, I'm glad I found a new home here with App Anvil. I'm excited to work with them. They're going to let me do a lot of things that I couldn't do on my own. You'll notice that there's someone helping out in the chat. I had that amazing new starting sequence, so thank you for the team for that. And my slides don't look like, well, something bad. So please expect more from me in 2025. My contact information is in the bottom left. If you have specific ideas for what you want to learn, either drop it in the chat right now or shoot me an email. We're building out a content calendar for most of next year and definitely want to see what else there is. But thank you all for spending an hour of your day with me. I really appreciate being able to do this. And, as long as at least one person shows up, I am more than happy, but we got a lot more than one people. So I'm glad you are all here. To Piwa, I hope I'm saying that right. Using a sandbox is a great way to practice, 100%. Emily, we need a Discord. That's on my list of things to think about. So I'm glad, again, you're reading my mind. Oh, Emily doesn't even need me anymore. Ouch. Oh, that triggered some coughing. Oh, right to the heart. All right, folks. I do appreciate this group. Thank you all for sticking around. How to use product management, Katrina, we'll take a look into that for you. But thank you all. I'm going to slow down the stream right now. The chat should be open for a few more minutes. This will be recorded on App Anvil's channel, so please make sure you're subscribed and liking it, and come back here if you need to. You're okay. All right. Appreciate you all, and see you all next time.